Hi, my name is Amy Presley. I am a doctoral student here at Oklahoma State University, and I am part of the Education Leadership Program. I am doing my project on looking at the economic status and ethnicity with the English Language Arts section of the 8th grade Oklahoma State Testing Program for Families exam. For my study, I wanted to look at the effect of students' economic status and ethnicity on the ELA section of the 8th grade OSTP exam. And my research question was, does a student's score on the ELA section of the 8th grade OSTP exam differ with economic status and ethnicity? So I had three null hypotheses. The first one was that economic status will have no significant effect on a student's score on the ELA section of the OSTP exam. My second null hypothesis was that ethnicity would have no significant effect on a student's score on the ELA section of the OSTP exam. And my third null hypothesis was that the economic status and ethnicity interaction would have no significant effect on a student's score on the ELA section of the OSTP exam. When it came to methods for the study, there were a total of 335 participants in 6 ethnic categories as self-reported on the OSTP exam. There were 18 students who self-reported as American Indian or Alaskan Native, 12 reported as Asian, 24 self-reported as Black or African American, 51 self-reported as Hispanic or Latino. There was a single student who self-reported as Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, and there is an asterisk here because their scores are going to be removed from the research due to too small of a sample size. 27 students self-reported as 2 or more races, and 198 of the test takers self-reported as white. The other category, economic disadvantage status, students were identified as being either yes, economically disadvantaged, or no, not economically disadvantaged. Of those, 108 were identified as economically disadvantaged, and 223 were identified as not economically disadvantaged. 2 students were not identified, and their results were also removed. So the population was 8th grade middle school students enrolled in a suburban Oklahoma school district who took the 2018 ELA section of the Oklahoma State Testing Program for Families exam. The intention was to find a representation of Oklahoma's 8th grade middle school student population. For the study, I used a split plot factorial design with alpha set at 0.05. When it came to the results of the study, when it came to ethnic categories as self-reported, the mean for students who self-reported as American Indian or Alaskan Native was 291.5 with a standard deviation of 18.912. The mean score of Asian students was 287.17 with a standard deviation of 23.984. Black or African American student average scores were 274.42 with a standard deviation of 32.126. Hispanic or Latino students had a mean score of 275.06 with a standard deviation of 28.433. Like I had mentioned earlier, the Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders scores were not used due to a single sample point size. Students who identified as 2 or more races averaged a score of 293.78 with a standard deviation of 25.226. And students who identified as white scored an average of 292.57 with a standard deviation of 25.594. When you looked at economic disadvantage status, students who were identified as economically disadvantaged had a mean score of 276.24 with a standard deviation of 29.493, and students who were identified as not economically disadvantaged had a mean score of 294.36 with a standard deviation of 23.618. Like I said earlier, 2 students were not identified. So while running the information, Shapiro-Wilk score showed the normal distribution with The p-value for the interaction showing that there was no significant effect. So that was broken down into the main effects for each of the individual category. Ethnicity also showed no significant effect, but interestingly enough, the economic disadvantage status did show some significance. So the results indicated that there was no significant difference in score on the 8th grade ELA section of the OSTP exam due to ethnicity. However, a student's status as economically disadvantaged did have a significant impact on their score for the ELA section of the OSTP exam. Limitations, benefits, and future studies. The limitations of the study were scores were used from a single middle school site. Repeating this study with multiple sites might bring a broader view both within the district, who has multiple middle schools, and in the broader region for the state. One of the benefits of the study is that it would encourage both districts and policymakers to increase funding and programs designed for economically disadvantaged students to help bridge that learning gap. For future studies, a larger sample size with middle school 8th grade students from across the state of Oklahoma might yield a broader, stronger set of findings.